Now to the coronavirus pandemic, where Arizona's numbers have been gradually going down, according to the State Department of Health Services. There were 187 new cases reported today, which is the lowest it's been since May. An additional 104 deaths are also being reported. Business owners who were forced to shut down because of the pandemic are ready to get back to work. This week, businesses are moving full speed ahead and hope to not only reopen, but stay open. Team 12's Mark Liverman is outside of Harkins Theaters, just one of the companies hoping to reopen its doors.
Well, great news for movie lovers, something some people have been waiting a very long time for. Harkins is reopening its doors on Friday. The company, though, is putting safety first, requiring all guests and staff to wear masks. The reopening comes after the Arizona Department of Health Services tweeted yesterday that Maricopa, Pima, and Pinal counties will all likely qualify to reopen in the moderate range this week. According to DHS, certain businesses could reopen if they comply with all requirements, including limited occupancy and enforcing mask requirements. The move comes after the number of positive cases and COVID-like cases in the hospitals are down. Now, if those numbers stay down by tomorrow, gyms can reopen at 25% capacity. Bars with food, theaters, and water parks can all open at 50%, though bars and nightclubs without food will have to stay closed. Yesterday, Mountainside Fitness said it would reopen tomorrow, even after the gym chain's proposal was denied by DHS. Now, despite the promising news, there are still plenty of businesses just not making the cut when it comes to requirements to reopen. As of earlier this week, more than 200 business proposals were denied, but for a list of all of the businesses allowed to reopen, just head to 12news.com. In Phoenix, Mark Liverman, 12 News.